Okay, first of all, thanks. Welcome on behalf of Sea at Risk and Mundus Maris. We are very happy that you are joining the session. So that and that session, yeah, and we have heard a lot this morning and in the early afternoon about the need for change and some attempts at change and how we can document it to get there, etc., etc. And what we would like to propose in this section is actually to share our combined experience and collect some good examples. And our two organizations perhaps simply say a word for. So I'm Lynn, and an organization which different members working at different member states, and we are working on the protection of the environment, and then we are looking at the European at the Brazil. Mundus Maris is a small non-profit. We are registered since more than 10 years in Brussels, but we have membership in Africa, in Europe, and in Latin America. And one of our main thrusts is really to support small-scale fisheries and try to do capacity building so that people have, express their voice more forcefully. And we also have Christine. And we have Christine online. Saying hello, but you can already see. You can. It's. Can you show the Christine on the?
Didn't think I can.
And Christine in Brussels is catering for the online. So what we'd like to invite you to do is perhaps just stand up very quickly and say who you are. Which organization you are from and which place you're from, simply to make sure we know who's a little. And I think some of you have already filled the sheet because we were suggesting that we might organize some follow-up stages. So that's what's in here. Would you like to start? Perhaps.
My name is Marina. Yes, in Norway, tech startup, trying to provide fishermen with tools they need to be safe and
So I'm also with Wave RS. I'm from Norway as well, and doing the same for partnering.
I'm Jerry. I'm Alicia Chapman. I'm still senior advisor to Life. I'm also director of the New Artisanal Fishermen's Association, which is the UK's representative body for 79% of the UK fleet that are under 10 metres in length.
Old battle horse.
Yeah. And I apologise for Brexit.
Hi everyone, my name is Morgan Robertson and I work for the Marine Conservation Charitable Blue Marine Foundation, and I'm based in the UK where I manage our projects there.
Anyone else?
I'm Ballyville. I'm the coordinator of the Scottish Cube Fishermen's Federation in Scotland, and I'm also an active fisherman. We promote small scale, sustainable fisheries, and we're also members of the Fisheries.
David McKenzie. I'm our delegation of the Scottish Fishermen's Federation, fisherman with Valley.
Well.
Hello, I'm Brian O'Riordan. I'm the Executive Secretary of the Low Impact Fisheries of Europe. Thanks to Brexit, really, that I'm living in Belgium, but I'm living there anyway, that I'm now a Belgian citizen since 2017, because I could see what was happening, I could see what you were doing. But yeah, I've been living in Belgium for the last 20 years, and a boy.
Maybe the online can present. I don't know if there are some people online. Can they present or like our message?
I think there's no one online.
There's no one online. Okay.
I think we have 3 attendees online, but I'm not sure if they can unmute themselves. And also, it's quite difficult to hear you. I think you have to really stay close to the microphone so we can follow well what you're saying in the room.
And let me intervene quickly too. Hi, this is Ratana. Just want to let you know that if you like to make the attendees become the panelists so that they can microphone, we can probably do that. Would that help?
Yes, that would be great.
Okay, so Thomas, let me see if I can do that. No, Thomas, you would need to do that. Could you do that?
Yes.
Thomas, are you there?
Yes, I have just.
Right. Okay, great. If you could just go to the attendee's name and you just, you can make them the panelists and then they would have permission to, they would have access to the microphone and the video too.
Yes, I just did.
Yes, I can see more people now coming up. Maybe you can also online introduce yourself quickly, like the people in the room. Maybe Natalie, you can start. If that works for you.
Yeah, no, sorry, this is just talking permitted, but we can make them a panelist, Thomas, so that way they can also show their video, if that's what you want.
Yes, please. If that's possible, that would be awesome.
It is possible. Thomas, do you know how to do that?
I'm not sure the option is coming for me.
Yeah, you just go to the attendees and you just, sorry, click on their name.
Oh yeah, I can do that as well, I see.
You can do that as well, because you're a co-host, correct?
Yes.
Perfect. I didn't sign in as a host, that's why I couldn't do it. Perfect. You got it now, Christine. So go for it. Thank you.
Great, now we can see you as well.
Just unmute yourself.
We can't hear you, Natalie. Maybe we can start with Alexandra. Or Natalie, can you try again if we can hear you now?
Yeah, I think, is that
yes,
better?
Perfect. Yes, we hear you perfectly now.
Good. I will stay muted most of the time because the children are home from school. I was actually supposed to be there in person, so but my husband hurt himself and couldn't look after the kids, so I'm here online. So I'm Natalie. I work at Bangor University in Wales, and I do quite a lot of work with the small scale fleet. Most of the fleet is under 10 meters in length, so a lot of our work is working directly with them to provide science and evidence and research in a participatory way.
Amazing, thanks for joining online. Alexandra, can you hear us? Can you speak or unmute yourself? If not, then I would suggest we continue back in the room.
Right, thank you, and welcome also to the online participants. We have another on-site participant who's just telling who is, so that we know who's in the room.
Sure, I'm Tom Collinson from Blue Ventures. We work with small-scale fishers in a range of contexts, mostly in coastal areas.
Wonderful. Could you hear that online?
Yeah. Not very well.
So we would ask everybody to speak up a little bit so that the communication online and on-site is easier. So I think without further ado, we are blessed to have Brian here to give us a little impulse talk and to get us straight into the subject. And then the onus will be on you, and we discuss more than having more separate presentations. Yeah, Brian, so to.
I'll just start by asking you to move to the next slide, or the first slide. I'm not sure how I can control it, but just to say that the Low Impact Fishers of Europe is a unique organization. It was launched in 2012 on the eve of the new Common Fishing Policy. It was launched by small-scale fishers who had come to Brussels, who had engaged in various workshops around Europe, to discuss the importance of small-scale fishing and to push for what was called a differentiated approach. One approach for managing small-scale fisheries in inshore waters based more on the kind of socio-economic and cultural aspects, and another management for the larger scale fishing based on quotas and economic performance. One thing that opened the eyes of small-scale fishers when they were engaged in all of this is that no one is speaking up for small-scale fishing at the European level. The national level organizations, the cofradías, the Comité de Pêche, the producer organizations, there may be small-scale fishers within those structures, but once you get to the top of the pyramid, it's top-heavy with trawler owners, multinational fleet operators, like for instance in France, the Comité National de Pêche is dominated by Dutch multinational fishing companies. So there was really no space. So this initiative came out not of the blue, but came from all these different fishers who had their own associations. So LIFE set up this platform to be a platform of associations across Europe who wanted one thing, which was to get to the decision-making table, express themselves and try and influence policies that benefited them. So today we are 32 associations from 15 member states, incorporating roughly 10,000 fishers. So we're a professional organization. We're registered in Belgium as a not-for-profit organization. We're a professional organization in the sense that our members are the ones who are deciding. Our board of directors is made up of professional fishermen. And I relate to them, I discuss with them, and they tell me whether or not they agree with what I'm proposing. But the idea is that they're there in the decision-making processes. At another level, we're an advocacy group. So we are advocating policies which favor small-scale fisheries. This year, 2012, is obviously the implementation report on the common fishing policy, which the Commission had to provide. So that's a very important milestone, 10 years after 2012, 2013 with the new common fishing policy. So we have a lot to say about that. But at another level, our members, something we discussed this morning, this whole issue of capacity building, empowerment, if you like, to be better able to organize themselves politically at one level, to engage with their member states, but at another level to be able to engage with the negotiations for quota, negotiations for access rights, engage in co-management, but also engage in the market, to be able to become price makers rather than be accepting the price through price takers. So to become agents of change. So LIFE has offices in Brussels. We have regional coordinators in the Baltic and North Sea and in the Mediterranean. And because we're a relatively small organization and we depend on grant support, which isn't always forthcoming, we try and build synergies with like-minded organizations. So we're talking with Blue Ventures, we know Blue Marine from a long time back. We're talking with Client Earth. We have a project with Client Earth in the Netherlands. We're talking with WWF in the Mediterranean. So this idea of this is to build synergies, forge alliances, and make a difference. So next slide, please. So this is just to give you an example of some of the milestones.
Sorry, Brian, to interrupt. The slides are not changing online. We still are on the first slide, on the cover slide.
So perhaps I'll just keep talking. Would that be good, or shall I wait?
I think it's probably best.
So one of the key achievements of LIFE is that it has become recognized within the European institutes, if not the voice for small-scale fisheries, because small-scale fisheries is obviously much bigger than LIFE, if not the voice, then a representative voice of small-scale fisheries. At the national level, it's a completely different picture, because LIFE is not integrated into any of the national level organizations. The national authorities don't recognize LIFE as a representative body. So we have no say in, say, national policies of Spain, France, Italy, but we are engaged in the the regional advisory councils. And there's one example here of the Baltic Sea Advisory Council. In 2016, we had 4 live members on the executive committee of the Baltic Sea Advisory Council, and they're still there. So that was quite an important achievement, a recognition that life is a valid voice. We do have the credibility and we do have the recognition. In the Mediterranean, life has become active in the General Fisheries Commission for the Mediterranean and Black Sea. And we're a founder member of what's called the Friends of Small Scale Fisheries, which is the collective group that is working to promote and oversee or facilitate the implementation of the regional plan of action. In Brussels, we've been involved with various campaigns, this building synergies, and one of the successful campaigns was for the European Parliament to ban this electric fishing, pulse trawling, which is obviously very controversial, but we see it as an important victory, a recognition that it's not just industrial fishing that gets to do what it wants to do, that small-scale fishers also have a valid point of view which needs to be taken into account. In 2019, the PESH committee, through a negotiation we had with them, put on a hearing in the European Parliament, what they call a fair deal for small-scale fisheries, which looked at the whole issue of allocating fishing rights, of co-managing, access to the markets, producer organizations, and how the common fishing policy is really skewed towards the interests of the larger scale and creates a very distorted scene. In France, we had a landmark ruling. We took not the French government, but what's called the arrêté, the allocation of the bluefin tuna quota to court in 2017. Final judgment was in 2020, where they ruled in favor of life and against the arrêté, saying that the arrêté was allocating bluefin tuna in a way that was lacking transparency, lacking objectivity, was not in line with the French law, and was not in line with the Article 17 of the European Common Fishing Policy. The French government have appealed. We haven't seen the case for their appeal. So we're there in the court, but justice delayed is justice denied. Again, in Brussels, the PESH committee took up an own initiative report on Article 17. That was voted in plenary back in June. So there's now a parliamentary resolution on Article 17, which means the Commission have to respond to that. That means they have to include some recognition of it in their report. So bit by bit, I mean, it's chipping away, but these are some of the examples of the stuff we're doing. And then we're imagining Europe 2022 to 2030, where Article 17 is adapted, small-scale fishers get access to quota, access to their own fishing zones. The CFP is modified, we have a differentiated approach. That's the imagination. And just the last slide is some images. If you just show the last slide. Oh, sorry. This is the vicious circle I described earlier, where we want to transition from. We talk of a fair transition to a good future. This is a very bad present where there is this vicious circle of lack of access, weak organizations, struggle to get fair prices, which encourages all these bad practices of illegal fishing, intensifying fishing effort, lack of generational renewal, risk of disappearing. So we're trying to imagine what the good future might be, which is encapsulated in this next slide. Where we want to have this equitable access to resources, particularly the low impact environmental aspect of small scale fishing is recognized and rewarded through support, through access, and through co-management. So this is what we're aiming for in our where we want to be. And the last slide. So there's lots of meetings. There we are outside the Commission. At the bottom, you recognize Jerry and probably me meeting with Commissioner Vella, meeting with Commissioner Sinkevicius. Bottom right, we're there in Costa Brava doing some course on Ecotourism. We're campaigning for a just allocation of quota on bluefin tuna. We're there in presenting on the bands project, the North Sea, Baltic and North Sea project. We're coming up with a strategy for the future. We're testing seal-proof gears in the Baltic Sea, and we're monitoring what's happening in the Mediterranean with interactions with cetaceans. So there's a lot going on. Life is involved at local, national, and European level. Thank you.
Lovely. I think that was a perfect introduction to our conversation. And what we actually would like to, I mean, first of all, it shows how important it is also to work at the institutional level, where some of the structures are being decided and where, you know, let's say the pathways are being paved or not. And what we would like to invite us now to do is to enrich that starting point with some good examples, including some that may not be institutionally based, but initiatives that fishers have taken locally, or, you know, whatever can feed the debate in terms of, okay, how can futures look like? What may be attractive for young people, that they create a next generation of these low impact fishers who care both for the environment and for good lives and for good sustainable and let's say nutritious high quality food for the population, because after all, that is the most important. And I think in Europe, we have a particular challenge because while globally, the latest case study, in-depth case studies show that small-scale fishers globally produce 40% of food, fish food, which is extraordinary considering the poor state of general statistics and so on. So that sort of puts a different perspective. And while all the subsidies go to, let's say, or not go to bottom trawling, etc., while the bottom trawler not only do produce a lot of bycatch, but also produce only 25%. So the small scale fishers of the world really outcompete in many ways the big ones. So personally, I would have no doubt that they also in Europe, if the rules are set right, and if we build on good examples, the small scale fishers have huge potential to regain the place where they were feeding us in the past. I mean, had it not been for the massive investment in fossil fuels after Second World War, you know, we could have now had quite a different picture. So we're really inviting you to
the group of three.
Yes, what we would like to suggest is that we do, you see a little bit how we suggest this session to work. We have had good impulse talk, and so what we would now suggest is that we form groups of three, so small groups, and each group takes a sheet. We call that an appreciative inquiry. In other words, going around, one person starts with giving a good example. A second person in the group takes notes in order to document the case and to make sure that that experience is not lost. And then the third person in the group can be like think themselves in the role of an investigative journalist, for example, and ask questions so that the case is presented as clearly as possible. What we have prepared some sheets, uniform groups, and what we are asking is we suggest we take half an hour So 15 minutes per case, so that you have enough time to sort of share that in a concise way and ask some clarifying questions, etc. And what we suggest is to write down the short summary of the story, and then also answer specific questions. Why do you think the story you're putting forward, or why was it you thought it was a particularly good story you want to share? Then what were the key principles? What made it work? Because these are the sort of things, if we generalize across many cases, we can learn something for future experiences. And of course, we would like to hear, Brian already shared with us some of the results and the impact, and perhaps we can identify some at the local case level. And then, of course, we should not forget to say, okay, what were the challenges we were up against and how did we overcome it? So I would share the sheets, and I did the colleagues online, can they see the sheets and also have a group among themselves to discuss? Christine?
Yes, for all online attendees, I just put a link in the chat to a shared document, which is the same sheet and the same questions the participants have in the room. And as we are just a small group, I think we will just be one breakout online and we don't need to split up again. So I see here Natalie and Alexandra, and there's one participant, I think, still as an attendee, which I'll try to get in, but let's see. But otherwise, we will just do it, the three of us.
Yeah.
I don't know if it will be disturbing if we discuss here. Maybe you can turn down the sound for now.
Yeah. So what we suggest is we will keep the time a little bit. So that when we're over about around 15 minutes or shortly before, we say, okay, finish your case and off we go. Yeah. So given that and you have the space.
We basically just met just now. So I don't include.
So we need to sort out, we've got one person.
Okay, all online participants. Great that you're here. I would suggest the three of us will work on one or two examples from our side. I assume, Natalie, as you've been working also with small-scale fishes a lot, maybe you have some good example or a good example that you would maybe like to share with us. I don't know, Alexandra, if you can hear us by now, and would be, of course, great. And if you also have ideas, please share them.
I'm going to take a few minutes just to think.
Yes.
That's okay.
Hi, Alexandra. Now we can see you as well. We can't hear you.
Okay, how about now? Can
Yes,
you hear me?
now we can hear you perfectly.
Okay. Okay. Hi everyone. Sorry, I couldn't introduce myself before, but it's just like the connection was very, very poor and I couldn't hear anything. So I just heard my name.
No problem.
Okay,
So
I'm here on behalf of our fish, actually. So yeah, with CIS at Risk, we're working on many other issues together. So I assume you know me by now. And yeah, we are working right now on Article 17. So it would be great if we have some good examples on how this could work into practice and how this quota allocation can benefit small-scale fishers. But I don't have any examples to share with you right now. I was hoping to get some insights from you guys, so that's why I'm here. So I would be interested if you have anything to present or anything we can work with.
I guess I haven't got a real specific example, but maybe if I just run through where we are in Wales. I mean, I'm doing a whole session tomorrow on it but I can run through maybe a little bit because so in Wales, about 95% of the fleet of Welsh boats is under 10 metres in length. So it is quite a small scale fishery. And up until recently, Welsh Government have only had the devolved powers to manage fisheries out to the 12 nautical mile. Now, since Brexit, that now is extending to the midline. So loads of things are really changing in Wales. And it's really difficult to even sort of keep up on a day-to-day basis, sort of at the UK level, how things are changing. But one of the things that's happening is, I don't know if you know, but we've had the UK Fisheries Act. And part of that is that all of the fisheries are going to have something called a fisheries management plan. So a lot of these are, there's some front runners and some that are taking a little bit of a back seat. And they're supposed to be sort of a 5-year plan, and they're supposed to bring in economic sustainability, stock sustainability, social sustainability. They're supposed to have goals across this whole thing, and we've got about a year to deliver them across all the species. So it's, you know, a lot of them are just going to be what we need to do, not because we don't have the data yet. But I guess one thing that's been really interesting, we've started a 5-year management plan for whelk in Wales, and whelk is actually, even though I don't think anybody in Wales eats whelk, I guess that's a whole other sort of session right there. It is our most valuable fishery to Welsh fishermen by quite a long way. So it was sort of the first stock that we've focused on. And what we focused on.
What stock is that?
Whelk, so the common whelk, Buccinum radatum. Yeah, it pretty much all gets shipped out to Korea. I think there are some that go to some places in Europe, but primarily it's a Far East stock.
Okay.
But a lot of the boats are so they're diversified, so they'll do, I know some of them do a little bit of scalloping in the winter, whelking in the summer. Some of them do a mixture of all different types of pots year round, and kind of sometimes it's more whelk, sometimes it's more crab and lobster. So it is, you know, there are a few large whelk boats. They tend to be nomadic. And one of the things that we wanted to ensure with the whelk legislation was that we had an adaptive way of managing, so that what we put in wasn't sort of fixed in stone. It could evolve as the data came and the evidence came. And also we wanted to ensure that those that were using whelks as part of a diversified fishing portfolio could continue to do so. And there was also this balance between, okay, we need some kind of I'll give you a little bit of a background. There was a massive increase in both effort and landings in around about 2017 because the value of whelk went really high. It then dropped off really, really suddenly. And so there was a lot of concern voiced across sort of industry, scientists, government. And so what Welsh Government wanted to do is, okay, let's get something in place to put the brakes on whilst we kind of figure out what the industry wants and what needs to happen. And the big one was that they needed to ensure that whatever they didn't preclude new entrants. That was a big thing for Welsh Government, that, you know, we've got a very aging fishing fleet or fishing employment sector. And so they don't want to limit new entrants, but equally they don't want the small scale fishermen to be put out of business, because they do need that access to the fishery year round. So what they've ended up actually doing is putting in an annual catch limit. But then what they've done is they've put also a monthly catch limit on that. And so that means that you can't have this sort of race to fish by the big boats that take up the quota right at the start of the season. And we're 9 months into the first year of it now. And actually it's had a really interesting effect on the fishery. We've had a few of the larger nomadic vessels coming in, and even though the monthly catch limit was such that if you took the biggest player, so the biggest boat that has landed over 5 years, and you divided their annual catch into 12 monthly segments, it should allow them to fish that amount. But because makes it spread out over the year, it's often made it less attractive to some of those large boats to come in and try and take a massive quota at the beginning of the year. And so we're actually below our projected landings at 9 months so we're going to be below our annual catch limit, but it hasn't had any negative impact on any of the small scale fishermen. They're able to carry on business as usual. So it was a really simple measure, and it was sort of a bit like, oh, I don't know, this seems too simple and it probably needs to evolve, but actually it's gone down really well. And even some of those larger boats have said, you know what, we've had a few criticisms, but we're really glad you're doing it. We're really glad Wales is starting to do something. And so I don't think there's been hardly any criticism of it at all. So it was just a really interesting sort of first step of there needs to be some kind of effort control or output control or input control, whichever way you look at it. And it seems to have so far worked really well. And we're now working on a kind of more of a 5-year, 10-year, 15-year plan of how that will evolve and how that will look. But one of the key drivers, one of the key things within it to try and ensure that the fishers themselves had a voice is that all of the data collection and all of the science has been participatory. So the fishermen have been involved in every bit of science that we've done. They've collected samples, we've been out on boats, we've sat down with them and gone through results. And I think that's been really helpful because it's helped us understand, as scientists, understand the whelk fishery. We can be out there and we can observe the day-to-day operations and such like, but it's also provided a platform to ask questions. And I do think that we get a lot more conversation and bi-directional flow of information with the fishermen when we're on a boat and you're chatting. If it's in a room like this, it tends to be very quiet and you ask questions and nobody wants to engage. But actually when you're on a boat in their kind of space, in their comfort zone, you can actually get a lot of information and a really good understanding of their knowledge of their area. So I'm going to stop talking now anyway. I've kind of waffled, but that's kind of, I guess, the best example of how we've engaged and actually got something through to policy. The rest of the stuff we're working on is a little bit earlier down the line. We haven't actually got to that policy stage yet.
And did you say that for how many years is the plan right now? Because you mentioned the 5 years management plan, but then you said that it's much
shorter,
so
we've got a 5-year plan. So in the legislation, it has to be a 5-year plan, but I'm pushing for government to have a little bit more of a longer time frame, because, and this is one of my sort of areas that I want to try and start looking at getting some grant funding for, is that that whole question of, if we increase the biomass and we have really healthy stocks on the ground, your CPUE goes up, and therefore you can decrease your carbon footprint, you can decrease your input costs and increase your profitability. But actually that is going to take a while to get there. You're probably looking at 10-15 year plan to get there. And it's that journey to get there, because if to get there, there has to be some kind of effort control, which potentially for some fisheries there could be. I think it's really, really important that the government understands that it's a journey, and actually, if we want there to be a fishery in 10 to 15 years time, how do we support them to get there? So we're trying to move to this longer, it'll be fairly high level, but that longer term view of where we're going, so that if there's an end point, we can start to look at the journey and how we support the transition. And I think that's really missing at the moment, because politics is short term. It's a 4 or 5 year election regime. You know, their budgets are annual at the moment. Welsh Government, because it's devolved, they get their budget from Westminster, so from the UK government, on an annual basis. So they can't fund any science past a year. And then they don't even know whether they're going to be there in 4 years' time. So everything's really short term. And I think that's where we're trying to push with this work is to have that detailed 5-year plan, but then a less detailed 10 to 15-year plan with a way of getting there. Because I do think that it's not going to be possible to have that all those 3 goals, the social, economic, and biodiversity or stock goals, they're probably compatible in 10 to 15 years time, but they're not necessarily all compatible at the moment in a lot of stocks, and it's about how we get there.
That's a very interesting case study, even though it's still in the very beginning. But what I find striking is how with this, it's a quite easy fix, let's say, a quite easy solution, which seems to work quite well. So I think this is a really great example that we can bring to the table here.
Yeah, and I think when I started working with Welsh Government on this, and it was much more, I was moving out of purely science and writing papers to actually being in working groups with policy makers and fishermen. I kind of felt like I don't understand why CFAS or whoever isn't doing anything. Why? And I kept thinking I must be doing something wrong. I must be interpreting something wrong, because we've brought in a whole bunch of ways of looking at the stock health so that we can monitor that annual catch limit. But I think it's this drive for in legislation you want to be managing above MSY, and a lot of data deficient stocks you can't do that yet, and therefore there's that strive for perfection before you do anything. And I think it's about taking that first step and being brave enough. I felt like I was putting my head above a parapet and I was waiting for somebody to shoot me down type thing. And that's kind of the basis for our session tomorrow is actually these small baby steps. They might not be perfection. They might not be that end goal, what that legislation is saying we have to get to, but are they better than doing nothing? And so far, most of the feedback we've had is yes, it's better than doing nothing.
And interestingly, you said that the feedback from also the larger boats was also positive. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so we had a few complaints. They were wanting us to do the catch limit on a quarterly basis rather than monthly, and they would still like that. And then they sort of saying, oh, well, we've had some boats that have converted away from whelking, they've gone to 100% scallop, and we've got one that's probably not going to go to Wales this year. And when I actually said, hang on a minute, since COVID, I don't know if you know much about whelk, but because Asia were much slower to come out of COVID restrictions than we were over here, there's actually a backlog in freezers. And so the market has dropped out the bottom. So when I actually said, so are you telling me you're not fishing for whelk in Wales purely because of the whelk permit, or is it because of market drivers? They're like, well, yeah, it is market drivers as well. And actually, when I said to them, but you could go for 2 to 3 weeks at the end of one month and the start of another month and land 100 tons. It's not. You'd only have to make, a trip every few months and still be able to land sort of 400 or 500 tons of whelk from the Welsh zone. And actually, when you question them about it, yes, it's not. They haven't got quite as much flexibility. They haven't got the chance to say, right, I'm going to go exactly where I want, when I want. But actually, it hasn't stopped them being able to fish there if they wanted to. And I think they see that. So, yeah, they would still like it to be a quarterly limit rather than a monthly limit. But they're still engaging in the process. We've got some of the representatives of the larger boats on the whelk management group. And it seems to be all right. I'm sure they'll keep pushing for a quarterly limit. But
I'm trying to tie what you're saying in the document. I don't know if you see that under breakout group 1 or room 1. You can have a look and also correct if I captured that right in the end. If you can see.
I'll have a refresh because it was blank just now.
Okay.
Yeah, for me it's also blank.
Yeah, and I did set it to be interactive. Let me see if I can.
Let me see. Let me open the link that I shared with you, because I opened that in my test. it's true. It is. I will copy paste, so you have it there as well, and I will work online. Then we're sure we have it all right.
And I think the other thing was that certainly in Wales, the fishermen are all calling out across all species. They feel there's not enough management. They feel that they've kind of been left for it to be a free-for-all, and the stocks are really not doing very well. And I think they're just really pleased that actually something's happened at last, rather than sort of promises and more data collection and more scientists coming out and more groups, more groups to talk at. It's been the first sort of show of action, so that's been quite well received as well.
Okay, I hope you can see my screen now.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what I can also do, if you give me your email address, I can also send it to you afterwards, and you can add points if you want. And you said that there's also a workshop session on this tomorrow.
So we've got the Welsh team have got a session. I think it's the first one, 11. And so what I'll do is I can probably link to the talk, I would think, in it as well.
Yes.
And some of the other members of the team are going to be describing all the different ways that we've had the fishermen involved in the science, which might be quite nice.
Yes.
Do you know the number
I
of the
wasn't
sessions?
sure what you meant by best experience in an artisanal fishery, but to me that's a really good experience as a scientist, actually having the fishermen involved in the science.
Yes.
Has been really useful, because a lot of the time they say to me, "Why are you doing that?" Like, and then you explain, and it's like, oh. And I think sometimes that kind of direct dialogue is missing.
Oh, I think I found it. It's better than the status quo, the journey towards sustainable fisheries in Wales, right?
Yeah.
Sounds like this one.
Okay. So in this document, we have a few questions. I think like how did it work? You already explained it, and I covered that a bit. I think what would be interesting, because you also have to leave, is maybe get your input on what were the challenges or obstacles that you encountered, and what were the key success factors. I mean, you already referred to talking to the fishers, engaging with them. Or what makes it a good example of a small-scale fisheries or support action for small-scale fisheries?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I would say is that kind of co-development and participatory science. It's definitely helped us as scientists. And I mean, one of the things we've got a bit of funding to do now is we're actually going back out, and we've got money to go and do like proper events and sit down interviews and stuff to get their feedback on it. So hopefully in about 6 months' time, we'll have a lot more actual fisher feedback on how it's working. I think probably the major challenge has been COVID and maintaining data collection through COVID, as you can probably imagine. And also just the timescales that some of these things are happening at. You know, it's like a bit like buses. Nothing happens for ages, and then everybody wants one at the same time. So, yeah, I would say the major challenges have been kind of just the fieldwork during the current kind of situation around COVID, and then just the timescales. It's all been quite rushed in the end. Could you scroll down so I can see the rest of the questions?
There's just one more. Do you have any online link presentation? And the beginning is basically to share the story and why did you like it? It's kind of the first point. Do you see when I'm scrolling and typing?
No, I've just got of your screen. Oh, now you're scrolling. Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't sure in which document I was, because I have it now open twice. So once online and okay.
Right, so no, you weren't scrolling. It was still all the time.
So
Yeah.
So basically, yes, why did you like it? It's the first question.
I think for me, personally as a scientist, I have learned a ton, both from the fishermen themselves and also from working directly with the policymakers. So actually taking that integrated approach rather than the science being that little bit more.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. And then we can, Alexandra, what did you say? Which session was it?
It's 11 a.m. Let me have a look.
The number is 3.2, better than the status quo.
Yeah. So I can share that presentation. And Welsh Government have actually given me a recorded presentation that will be part of that session of how they've actually gone about like the policy side of it. And the fact that, you know, it's a permit and why that works and stuff. Whether it's the same in other countries, I don't know. But from a legal point of view, we tried to get some of our fishers to come along, but they did make it. But they have actually given us some recorded videos of chatting with us about how it's been, the project's been. So we'll be sharing those tomorrow as well.
Amazing. Yeah, if you have any links or any presentation you can share with us, feel free to add the link here at the bottom, or you can, or send it to me. I will put in the chat my email address.
Yeah, I was going to say, if we swap it, I'll put my email address in as well.
Yes, amazing.
Because I mean, these are all being recorded, aren't they? So it should be possible, I would think, afterwards. If not, I can certainly share the presentation, but obviously you won't have the talk.
Yes, I think the presentation will be already very useful.
And the Welsh Government's ones, it's got him talking in it as well, actually. So
amazing. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing. I think it's a very interesting example.
Yeah, I mean, it feels, when you go to an international conference, it feels quite small. But for me, it feels like quite a big achievement because it feels like we've been like doing nothing for years. You know, you keep gathering data, and everybody says, "Oh, we need to do more of this and more of that," and it's finally like, let's actually do something.
Hi, Helen. I can't hear you at all.
Here, can you hear me now?
Yes,
right.
Now it's better.
It's just, I don't know which story you are in, but I think it's time to go to the next story. I don't know. And also, if it's possible to write keywords of the first story, that is, you think it's important to remember, like 3 or 4, if it's possible.
Yes. I can write them in the short summary of the story. A few keywords.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't think we have a second story, really, but
one story is fine.
Yes, but we have one really great.
Okay, nice. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I guess as well, what you guys, keywords that you guys took from it as well, but I would have said sort of participatory research is my key one. Research and policy.
Participatory science as well.
Yeah, participatory science, yeah.
I know what stuck for me was this very simple solution to a rather complex problem that seems from first indication to work quite well with everyone being happy. It's not really a keyword, but
yeah, so I guess it has tried to keep things a bit simple. Yeah.
And also probably the long-term planning, even though this is still under development, but
that desire for a long-term view. Yeah.
Okay. So. If you still have time and can think of another story or something else that you experienced in happy to hear that. And
yeah, we'll have to be quite quickly. I need to leave in about 5 minutes.
Yes.
But during COVID, the market, because I guess as well for context, obviously with Brexit happening right almost at the same time or just before COVID, the market for our crustacean fisheries completely collapsed. It was just horrendous. And Welsh government contacted us and said, look, we are looking to get some money, looking to do something sort of on a more, as there is no market, something that's sort of more of a conservation type activity or a science-based activity, but that will bring benefits to the fishermen and maybe be a way of getting them some money. And so the fishermen suggested a V-notching program for lobsters. Do you guys have V-notching? Do you know what that is? So if there is a notch, like a V-shaped notch taken out of the tail of a lobster, it's prohibited to be landed. So and that can take, depending on how deep the V-notch is, that can protect the lobsters for 2, 3, 4 molts. And it's been used in the past. Fishermen voluntarily use it to, if they get a buried female and they want to put a V-notch in it to show that it's a breeding female, and then they can return it and she's protected. So we were given some money and basically said, right, we want you to pay the fishermen to go and do this V-notching, but we want you to get some science out of it as well. So we basically use the V-notching as a batch marking. So we knew that anything with a V-notching would be protected from any fishing activity, and therefore only natural mortality would be acting on it. And anything without a V-notch potentially would have fishing and natural mortality acting on it. So we worked with quite a few fishermen, and we haven't finished the data analysis yet, but hopefully the results of this will allow us to estimate gear selectivity curves, and also potentially estimate natural mortality, although that will be dependent on sort of getting enough of our recaptures back. But that basically was a really nice support action that wasn't just a handout. It was about the fishermen going out and doing something really positive, because lobsters are quite local. They generally stay within a few kilometres. So they felt that they were protecting and looking after the stock that would be theirs in a few years' time, but it also allowed them to be paid during a time when there was no market. And a lot of the fishermen are really keen to sort of take this forward in not just somewhere in COVID, but also, for example, we were talking about how do we get from where we are now to 10, 15 years down the time if we need to decrease effort for a period to rebuild stocks. The fishermen are quite keen that potentially this could act as a model, so that they get paid to do the science, and it allows them to reduce their fishing effort. So that's something that we're working on. Did that make sense?
It does. It does. I'm wondering. Interrupt us anytime when you have to leave. I'm wondering. I mean, especially with this idea of having this as a scenario for times when you have to reduce effort. This kind of works if you temporarily have to reduce effort, but I think that wouldn't work if you, for fisheries where you basically for a really long period of time have to reduce effort, right?
Probably
Do you think
not.
That would work.
It depends. I guess it depends. You know, it can't cover all of the loss, but I think there were certainly fishermen that felt that even a few weeks of the year that brought in a bit of money would be helpful in these scenarios, and I think it could be one of the measures. So you're not just being given a subsidy, you're being given a subsidy to do something a little bit like in agriculture, where the farmers are now not just given a farming subsidy based on the size of their farm, but they are given money to go and plant trees or go and do something positive for the environment. And I think that was kind of where they felt that this could start to look at ways of them become custodians of the environment, and actually that's part of their job rather than a cost to them, which can tend to happen. So yeah, I'm afraid I am going to have to head off, but it's a shame because this has been the first interactive session and it's been great. So sorry about that, but I don't know what time you're on to, probably will be finished by the time.
I can share with you. I have your email address, so I will share with you the outcome in the end.
Oh, thank you. And I'm just
Thank you so much for explaining all that.
Christine, can you hear me?
My email, so if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natalie.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you.
Oh, no, at least two. I think it worked.
Can you hear? Christine, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for being very disciplined and collecting interesting stories. We have, and also to putting down a few of the key, what you consider key concepts on those cards. And perhaps we can have a look together at what you thought were essentials for success and why it worked.
I'm just really curious. It's not possible to have 1 minute per stories.
Yes, right.
It would be nice if you have a.
Yes, you are quite right. I'm sort of getting carried away already.
So maybe you can start with 1 minute just in short the story.
So our story was a story from Norway, and it was a story about the way that consultation is done on fisheries management issues, and how consultation is done when decisions are being taken on new laws and so on, which is very different to the process that we have in Europe. So in Norway, they seem to have set up structures where the national authorities are able to consult in a differentiated way with both large and small scale fisheries. And they have a mechanism for picking out the importance of, let's say, what the small scale fisheries are saying compared to what the large scale fisheries are saying. So it's a kind of built-in, if you like, conflict resolution mechanism. The conflict doesn't take place within the organizations, but it may take place in the discussion that's going on, if I interpreted that right, with the government in the open arena. We don't have that in Europe, because by the time you get to the European level, you just got the POs or the representatives of the big organizations who are there representing everybody. You don't have the small voices who are saying, yes, but. So this inclusion of voices which are saying, yes, but, I think is
changes the dynamics.
Yes, it's the dynamics at the heart of this success story.
Interesting.
Is that okay?
Yeah. So one of the things the results from this is that small scale fishermen have protected areas.
Can you please speak up? It's very difficult to hear for us here online. Sorry for that.
What he's saying is that the small scale, one of the results of this process is that in Norway, the small scale fishermen now have protected areas at sea. They have their own protected fishing areas as a result of this process. That is one example.
Maybe you can decide which story you want to talk about? The writer or the journalist?
The clock is ticking. We, at the Scottish Keel Fishermen Federation in Scotland, we were advocating for the introduction of extensive spatial management, and one of the consequences of that was a conservation concern. So we advocate for keeping fuel in the areas. That was a reintroduction of an old 3-mile limit on trawling, and the consequence of that would be that there would be a lot more creels. The concern was that there would be a proportionate increase in entanglement of cetaceans that might go along with that. So the story was that we collaborated with cetacean conservation organisations who would normally be our adversaries in this kind of thing, and we ended up in bringing in some revenue and developing entanglement mitigation strategies, which would have never come to pass had we not worked collaboratively on this. And the net result is that Scotland is now leading the way on entanglement mitigation strategies for static gear.
Super.
Power to you.
We had two fairly similar stories in our group. The first one was a story from Italy, where there was an inshore exclusion zone for static gears that bottom trawlers were not recognizing and were fishing inside the exclusion zone at night illegally. And a local fisherman called Paolo tried to get the government to act and restrict the trawling activities, but they didn't act. And so he took the matter into his own hands and dropped a bunch of marble sculptures into the sea to prohibit trawling. And it's been quite effective because some of the locations of the obstacles are known, some of them are not known. There's a big deterrent to bottom trawling because it's a serious, potentially life-threatening risk to fish inside that area. And then the story we heard from Scotland was the 3 nautical mile limit history and current campaign. So there used to be a 3 nautical mile limit on bottom contact mobile gear, and it was revoked due to pressure from the mobile industry. And now Bally and colleagues in our seas and Hayden in the Scottish Crew Fishermen's Federation are campaigning for its reinstatement.
We keep fingers crossed. Yeah. Yeah. So I think do we have a yes an example from the online conversation?
Yes, we have a very nice example that Natalie shared with us from the Whelk Fisheries in Wales, where they work together with fishers really in an interdisciplinary approach and research to find basically an easy solution to a complex system of needing to reduce fishing efforts. And basically what they came up with was that they had an annual catch limit and on top of that monthly catch limits. So to avoid that big boats would come in and fish the whole quota for the year in the first part of the year, so that small scale fishers have something to fish the whole year. And they're 9 months in this program now, and so far the results look really good. There's hardly any impact for the small scale fishers and they can go about doing their business. And also surprisingly, the feedback from the bigger boats are not too critical. So it was really, so this is the beginning of a bigger effort to develop a 5-year plan and also then longer in a 10-year plan on top of that. She will explain about all this process in a session tomorrow as well in the morning, called Better Than the Status Quo, session 3.2. So if someone interested to listen in.
Thank you. So I think we have some interesting material here. And I think we also got some keywords from all of you, including from the online conversation.
Can you see the, maybe can you turn the camera?
Can you see it?
We can see it, but we can't read it. We just see that there are papers on it.
Yeah. Okay, let me just go around. We were looking for what we want, I mean, the sort of lessons, the take-home lessons from these good examples. And what we find here is, for example, a fisher-led initiative. We see that 3 times actually.
we see that another keyword was tourism created where otherwise the fisheries wouldn't, which would otherwise not be there. Then we have participatory research and science. We have new coalitions between different actors. We have co-management and closer relation between actors and regulators. So in a way, we have perhaps these elements like new coalitions to some extent, co-management and close relation between actors and regulators, sort of grouped together in terms of building broader consensus around what you want to do. Then we have, and collaboration, I think, would also belong into that category. Then we have key to success, and in particular differentiation, recognition of diversity, setting up a system that can listen to all groups and in an equitable and fair manner and in a transparent way. Then we have long-term view and a longer perspective on fisheries management. We have a historical precedent. I think that relates to what you were saying probably, that there was a long tradition which now we want to revive under new conditions. Building common ground, and then specific individuals. I would guess that that relates to leadership.
I wrote that just because I think there's always individuals within every project that just drive it forward and never give up. And I think if those individuals aren't there, although I absolutely believe in collaboration, it sometimes
So you need both.
Very passionate people.
Yeah, passionate people.
Well, people who don't tire of just doing the job, basically campaigning.
Yeah. I don't know, can you agree to that? I think
Definitely.
we have
leadership.
observed a lot of
Leadership, you need champions.
Yeah.
If you just get a group of fishes together and they've got no interest in the project, it's not going to happen.
And then we have, last but not least, simple solutions to complex problems. That is perhaps not always so easy, but that is certainly what we would like to see. Or not overcomplicate matters even further, just reduce as much as we can. Yeah, so I think that gives us food for thought to go on. And tomorrow, we would very much like to welcome you back. And anybody who also wants to join us, who has not been perhaps had a commitment in a parallel session. And the suggestion then is to go deeper into the cases you choose, you want to develop, so that we go further in terms of filtering out what is it that makes a success story, because really the whole thinking goes, okay, how can we move from the analysis to action? And how can we team up, do better, find new alliances, seek additional funding for things to happen, etc., etc. Because I think that is also the funding point is also something that we should by no means neglect, because we can see, I've been working for some time in Senegal and elsewhere, but we see that when the small scale guys have very little means and their incomes is already decreasing, even engaging in these conversations means they lose income. They cannot really afford that. So unless you support their participation, it won't just happen. And it's wishful thinking. So we don't want window dressing, we want the action to take place. So I don't know how we are doing for time, but it looks like we're doing quite well. Are there any other remarks, online or in the room? Anything do you want to underline or you want to add?
think the thing that's missing there, and it's probably missing in this whole forum, is the actual regulators, the governments and the people who make these marine statutory marine policies. Because we can come up with all the great ideas in the world, but unless we can get support from governments and regulators, then all our ideas are worthless. And so it's kind of missing from the board. I think they're missing from this room. I mean, I'm from Scotland. Marine Scotland are our fisheries regulator, and they're not here. I very much doubt they're watching online. But we're in a bubble here, and it's not how much we agree or innovate or how great our solutions are. Unless we can reach out of that bubble and convince our regulator to do what it is we're asking them to do, then we're kind of wasting our time. So I think that's an observation.
Yeah, it's certainly true. We observe that elsewhere as well, that the government agencies or the Coast Guard or whoever is responsible for certain functions is not really willing to engage. But I do think that even if they don't, it should not lead us to sort of not do anything, because it will make things worse. And the more people we manage to mobilize, the more public pressure will there be in terms of doing the job for which they're paid, right? So I think that is the leverage. And I think I like your point of the passionate people. I think that is very, very important to, just keep the fermentation going and building that.
Well, I think, if I may, that is one of the major challenges that, as Buddy says, we are in something of a bubble. But at the same time, it's a circle where the aim is to develop or change policy. And that means you have to speak to the managers and the regulators. And you have to, I hate to use the phrase, but you have to understand how the game is played. I have seen time and time again, really ardent advocates for ideas, just coming up against this brick wall. Some of the colleagues I worked with before I took this organisation over were great fishermen and very strong advocates and leaders in their areas, but they had no idea about how to speak to managers and regulators in a way to get change. And they would actually undermine a lot of the initiatives that would have been very beneficial. So that circle I talked about was, if you can't get traction with a direct approach for a whole range of reasons, I think it's worth saying that, generally speaking, in the small-scale fisheries world, we're the only ones that want change. Everybody else, government, civil servants, large-scale players, they're quite happy with the status quo because they hold all the cards. So the other thing we can do is develop initiatives that catch the public's attention, so that circle, then when you can get public support and NGO funding and all the rest of it, that's what can put pressure on regulators to the side, if you like. But it still means you have to present a rational and well-considered policy idea to them. Otherwise, it's just noise, and that gets you nowhere.
Yes, I think that's a very, very important point. We see also a lot of these research results, they seem to speak such a clear language, but somehow they go nowhere. And so I think what I hear you say is that we need to hone our skills and package messages in a way, first to speak to the public, but also in language that the politicians are receptive to, because they want to be re-elected, etc., etc. So it's, and I mean, just as a little aside, I was listening to a recent example from India where there's an industrial fishery was developed at the expense of the small guys, and initially the government had even prohibited, for example, shrimp farming in the coastal zones. It went up to the highest court, but with clever marketing and packaging messages that the big guys turning the small fish into that was worth nothing into valuable fish meal and money for the country, etc., etc. They turned the whole public mood around. It was really horrendous to see. And so I think you make a very, very important point. That is something, and when we're not specialists, perhaps we need to talk to people who know how to communicate more effectively and blend those different things. I mean, we still want our messages to go out, but in ways that can be understood by a larger public. Okay, so thank you first of all to be all very disciplined. I think we have respected our time. Last chance from the colleagues online. Are there any other comments you want to share? Now, if that is not the case, I would invite you to come back tomorrow to deepen that conversation and to give us a little bit of feedback on, because there's always something you can improve. How did you like the session? Was it okay? Not neutral, or was it not so good? So if you would just vote with your thumb how you thought about the session. Now let us take a photo. Yeah, but it's nice to have a. Oh yeah, we need half. Yeah, there's always something to improve, right? So thank you very, very much. And now the reception is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ola, for joining online.
And thank you for doing it the hard way online. And no drinks for you. Sorry for that. You can have drinks at home.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.